Give it a minute.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is the House Appropriations Committee Transportation and Environment Subcommittee meeting, and we are handling two agencies today. The first,
No, it's Carol. What's up?
WMATA, and the second is MDOT. Anyone who is on the call, just be sure and mute your screen so we're not picking up outside noise. And we will begin with our legislative analyst, Kelly Norton, on WMATA. Ms. Norton. Is Ms. Norton with us? She may be at the House office building.
She just joined.
Okay.
Just give her 1 second.
All right.
Whenever you're ready.
There she is.
Hello. Okay, I'm Kelly Norton. I will be presenting WMATA's operating budget. Beginning with page 1, we have the operating budget summary. The budget for fiscal 2027 increases to approximately $700 million, a 3% increase compared to fiscal 2026. The pay-go capital budget summary is on page 2. The fiscal 2027 allowance increases to $356 million, or 1.3% from fiscal 2026. In fiscal 2026 and 2027, the $167 million in the governor's capital dedicated funding is from general obligation bonds. Exhibit 1 on page 5 shows the annual ridership across WMATA from fiscal 2020 through 2025. Total ridership increased by 9% to 264 million trips in fiscal 2025. On page 6 is Exhibit 2, showing the percentage change from the prior year for revenue miles, passengers per revenue mile, operating costs per revenue mile, and the operating cost per passenger trip for both Metro Rail and Metro Bus service for fiscal 2021 through 2025. According to the Managing for Results, or MFR data, fiscal 2025 decreases in revenue miles for both Metro Rail and Metro Bus, and increases in operating costs per revenue mile for both Metro Rail and Metro Bus. Exhibit 3 on page 7 shows the fare box recovery rates. WMATA indicates that the MFR submission used in the creation of Exhibits 2 and 3 was incorrect. WMATA should explain the cause for the discrepancy and how the agency plans to mitigate discrepancies in future MFR submissions. Exhibit 4 on page 8 shows the overview of agency spending in fiscal 2027. The capital budget is $2.1 billion, with Maryland contributing 16.6%, or $354 million, and the operating budget is $2.7 billion, with 26%, or $711 million coming from Maryland. Exhibit 5 on page 10 has the operating expenses by category. Personnel accounts for 72% of the proposed fiscal 2027 operating budget. The fiscal 2026 figures are the net expenses, while the fiscal 2027 are the gross expenses. WMATA should provide committee members with the fiscal 2026 gross operating expenses and discuss efforts to ensure consistent presentation of this data in future submissions. Moving to the operating revenues, Exhibit 6 on page 11 shows the proposed fiscal 2027 revenue sources. Here we have the operating revenues and the operating subsidies from the jurisdictions. Operating revenues such as fare collection, advertising revenue, and parking facilities make up 25% of the fiscal 2027 budget, and the remaining 75% from the 3 jurisdictions. DC contributes the most at $746 million, and Maryland is the second largest contributor at $711 million. Looking to MDOT's 2026 Consolidated Transportation Program, or CTP, for WMATA, Exhibit 7 on pages 12 through 13 shows the 6-year program capital spending from fiscal 2026 to 2031. The chart shows the yearly $167 million in the governor's capital dedicated funding. The mandated base includes the first 3 components minus federal funds. The mandated base capital grows by the required 3% over the 6-year period, and the 6-year total is roughly $3.2 billion. WMATA's fiscal 2027 to 2032 capital improvement program, CIP totals $13.5 billion, On page 14, Exhibit 8 provides the 6-year capital program funding sources for the CIP. The largest contribution comes from the funding jurisdictions for approximately 45% of the 6-year funding. Federal funds comprise 30% of the 6-year total. The remaining sources are debt, prior year funding, and a prospective federal grant. Exhibit 9 on page 15 has the fiscal 2027 capital spending by category. Rail car related spending is the highest category at $372 million, followed by bus facilities and paratransit at $340 million. However, if you combine the top 4 categories, over $1 billion will be spent on Metro Rail related activities. Exhibit 10 on pages 15 through 16 shows the fiscal 2027 WMATA capital program funding sources and the expected Maryland contribution. Here you can see how the $354 million from Maryland contributes to the fiscal 2027 CIP. Exhibit 11 on page 16 shows the difference between the WMATA proposed budget and Maryland's proposed budget. WMATA is proposing $711 million from Maryland for operating, an additional $13 million compared to Maryland's proposed $698 million and $354 million for capital. If WMATA's proposed budget is enacted, there will be a budget amendment to match Maryland's operating budget to WMATA's. Moving to issues on page 18, WMATA and the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments launched the joint initiative DMV Moves in June 2024 to create a unified vision and a sustainable funding model for the region's transit network. WMATA and the Council of Governments have endorsed the DMV Moves Task Force Plan. The DMV Moves Plan calls for an additional $460 million in capital funding from the 3 jurisdictions beginning in fiscal 2029. Maryland's contribution would be $152 million and grow 3% annually. The DMV Moves plans would reduce the backlog of deferred maintenance, support modernizing the rail system, improve local bus service, create a regional bus priority network, and embrace regional rail. On page 19, Exhibit 12 shows a side-by-side breakdown of the current funding plan compared to the DMV Moves plan by capital phase. The current plan is programmed at $13.5 billion from 2027 to 2032. The DMV Moves plan is $18.3 billion, an additional $4.8 billion over the period. The DMV Moves plan would invest an additional $3.2 billion in the concept phase, which is the first main phase before an investment becomes a project or program. Exhibit 13 on page 20 shows the capital program investment by mode. It excludes debt service and revenue loss from capital projects. The DMV Moves plan would invest an additional $3.2 billion in rail and over $830 million into the bus system. On page 21 are the recommended actions, and they are to concur with the governor's allowance for the operating and pay-go budgets, and this concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you for that presentation. And we will now move on to WMATA. Who is Mr. Clark here with us?
I am, Chair. How are you today?
I am well, thank you.
Would you like me to start?
Yes, please go ahead.
Excellent. Well, good seeing you again. Good afternoon, Chair Watson, members of the committee. I'm Randy Clark, the General Manager of Metro. Nice to be with you again. I see we're up virtually, so I want to recognize Acting Secretary Thompson is here as well. Appreciate and thank her for her new role and partnership that we do so much together here between MDOT and Metro. Want to also thank Kelly Norton for her analysis and going through those remarks today. I go through a little bit, and then actually there was a question from Kelly that I think it might make sense. I'll give an update on that and just proactively to answer that question. 2025 was a pretty big banner year for us at Metro. Reflect a lot of the dedication of our incredible workforce, including many of our workforce that live in Maryland, and really shows how we drove regional partnerships. We were recognized this year by the American Public Transportation Association, so that's the Association for Transit around the country, with several of its highest awards. First, we won the Rail Security Gold Award. We also won the Outstanding Partnership and Public Transportation Award, and the highest honor, we were selected as the 2025 Transit Agency of the Year, so top agency in North America. We're very proud of that. The industry awards, of course, are really important, and we really appreciate them. They're great for morale and recognition, but it's how we show value to the region is how we really measure ourselves here at Metro. So a few highlights I want to mention from 2025. On the rail side, we were able to launch with a lot of new things we were working on. 90% on-time performance on Metro Rail, which is the highest in years on the system. We now have contactless credit debit card payment on both trains and buses throughout the system, and parking is coming next. So it makes the system a lot easier to use and reduces cost on the system to collect cash. So a really great feature. On our bus network redesign, we're able to provide almost 7% more service for the region without adding additional operating costs. So connecting more people to activity centers while being more cost efficient. We were able to expand as part of that our Metro bus frequent service network. So half of our customers now have service 12 minutes or better across the bus system. And really importantly is about safety. We led across the National Transit Database on many safety categories across the country, but crime is obviously something both real and perceived that is a big deal in the transit space. And I'm happy to report that we had the lowest crime year ever in the history of Metro in 2025. So a lot of great work by our Metro Transit Police team, but including our partners around the region to make sure both employees are safe, but all of our customers are safe. During the year, we had about 270 million trips. So we had about 12 days that we had 1 million trips, but that was 6% more than 2024. We expect million ridership days to kick in really soon now that the weather is starting to turn. Well, hopefully the weather is starting to turn in the next couple of weeks. Most of that ridership, or a big chunk of that ridership, is Maryland driven, over 130,000 daily Metro rail trips and 107,000 daily Metro bus trips. Those are how we generally measure ridership in Maryland, and the whole system we are continuing to see growth. I want to talk a little bit about joint development in our real estate portfolio because that's so important, and it's been highlighted by both Governor Moore and the legislature and some of our local partners in Montgomery and Prince George's County. This past year, we broke ground on 2 major joint development projects in Maryland, one at Grosvenor, again in Montgomery County, and one in New Carrollton. And both of those were actually senior housing projects with kind of public-private partnership. We're really excited to see those move forward. We also selected a developer. There's a 14-acre site that we have in the North Bethesda area that's kind of being built into a life science campus between the state and Montgomery County. We're really happy with that partnership. And I want to mention, I see Delegate Fletcher Harrison is on this committee. And I want to mention we had an event where we selected a developer with her, Governor Moore, down at Capitol Heights, and I'm really excited. That's been talked about for a long time there, and that was a really good event to kickstart what we think will be a really great project there as well. And then there's many others that we hope to advance with the state and local partners as well, including a lot of the Blue Line development that I know the state has earmarked money for. Part of why we're performing really well is the work the General Assembly did with partners around the region in 2018 with dedicated capital funding. That infrastructure was in desperate need. I lived here for a piece of that time. Many people remember there was a lot of fires, derailments. The system just really never had dedicated capital funding. So that has led to our infrastructure being a much better, what we call state of good repair, and put ourselves in a position to perform much better. With that said, the capacity to issue new debt upon that funding is actually quickly running out. And most of that has to do with we've lost a lot of purchasing power with that funding. We've experienced some of the highest inflation. Obviously, everyone has, but the work that we do, inflation has really impacted that funding significantly. So that is starting to slow the pace of our capital investment and could have serious implications of us sliding backwards. So not only not going forward, but actually sliding backwards to the conditions that we all work so hard to get Metro past that. So as Kelly mentioned, we formed an 18-month partnership with the Greater Washington Council of Governments called D&B Moves, where we have leaders from Maryland, Virginia, and DC, and the federal government all get together, reviewed, I would argue, the most transparent, data-driven regional topic that's ever been covered here in the DMV. And we really went through what kind of investment levels are needed to ensure that we don't go backwards and continue to modernize this system and drive economic development, but also quality of life for our region. So the whole group got together, the members of the D&B Moves Task Force, which involved our board, the Council of Governments, a lot of elected officials from around the region, all voted to support a funding plan to secure Metro's capital budget identifying a $460 million a year, growing at 3% annually for the first time ever, a true revolving renewable bond program. And I just want to reiterate, this was really across all 3 states that everyone came together, had the business community, had a lot of community advocacy groups as part of this as well. The 460 is not a Maryland number, that is a regional number across all 3 states. So to make that obviously happen, we would appreciate consideration and support the legislation being enacted this year. I want to really recognize on the House side, Chair Foreman and his incredible leadership. He has HB 386, which is the Metro Funding Modification Act, and I believe that he has co-sponsors from all over Prince George's County and Montgomery County on that as well. So just really want to just thank the members of this committee for co-sponsoring that. Virginia is currently working through similar legislation. There was a Metro funding aligned in their budget that came out just yesterday on Sunday. And DC's process usually follows Maryland. It's just the way the budget cycle works, but we're obviously highly engaged with them as well. So I kind of wrap with, we are very excited to work with Maryland. We're really proud of the system that we're in. We do not want to go backwards. We want to continue to drive kind of the economic value the Metro can provide this region and the quality of life that we know so important for people in Maryland and across the region. I think it might sense, Chair, that I mentioned the part that Kelly mentioned in regard to there's like a data, what I think might be looked at as an inconsistency. And I think just for clarity, we've submitted the same way year after year after year on this, but what basically happens on this is there's the managing for results, program and how that data comes in. We submitted that in late August just like we do every year. But WMATA also has a requirement to file final numbers to the National Transit Database, and we do that just around November 1st. That information is more accurate, and then we resubmit that back to Maryland and our other jurisdictional partners that are looking for that information as well. So the first information that Maryland gets, like a lot of our partners, is the preliminary, and then the data gets finalized for the federal submission, which is audited on the federal side by November 1st. And then we submit back just to reconcile any changes in the data. So I just want to clarify that it might feel like an inconsistency, but it's a timing on the preliminary to the final data that we do across the industry on the National Transit Database. And hopefully that better explains that data discrepancy. With that, again, thank you for having me here today. Happy to answer any questions or take any comments you may have for Metro. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. Can you just go back to what you just talked about on the data from preliminary to final, and the final is submitted by November 1st? Is that what you said?
Yes, ma'am. It's officially the law is 120 days following the end of the fiscal year. So it's about November 1st.
Okay. So why don't we have the final data in the legislative analysis?
I can't speak that. My team tells me that we have submitted the final data.
Okay, so
which we do apparently the same process every year. So we do preliminary, we do the final, and then it gets submitted as the revised.
Okay, would you work with our legislative analysis people to make sure that they have what they need? Because according to what they just gave us, they do not have it, and we'd like to see that updated data. Yes,
ma'am, of course. Charlie Scott, I think many people know, is on the call, and Charlie will confirm again today that data is delivered.
Okay, thank you. And I'm going to go to Delegate Spiegel to start off with some questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you all for the presentation and for the good work that you all have been doing. First, I just wanted to ask, and I appreciate you addressing the MFR discrepancies. Could you also just address this question that DLS raised about gross operating expenses versus net operating expense numbers?
Yeah, Delegate, good seeing you, and thanks for the question. I'm going to have to get Charlie to follow up on that one as well, because again, I think that might be a timing based on just the submission and our overall budget cycle. But if there is any data that seems that anyone doesn't have accurate data, we will definitely give it any data that is available. It's in our budget. It's publicly. We release the general manager's proposed budget in December. Our board should vote on generally it's April when our board approves our budget. It's usually after session. your session. So again, if the analysts or they don't have they need to reconcile that data, we're happy to have Charlie work directly with them today.
Thank you. And if I may, Madam Chair, I have a couple other questions.
Yes, let me just say one quick thing on that data. Delegate Spiegel, that is Exhibit 5 on page 10, and we're going to need that data sooner rather than later. If you could also work with the legislative analysis to make sure that we have those two deficits in the legislative analysis that we have before us. And go ahead, Delegate Spiegel. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to dive in a little bit to the amounts requested for capital investment in the budget. And first, I wanted to ask about the preventative maintenance operating costs, which jump out from the budget, obviously, because we're talking about potentially doubling the amount of capital funding that's used for those operating costs. And I understand the hope is to return in a couple of years back to the sort of baseline of 60 million. But right now you're asking for 126 million. And I'm just sort of want to make sure that isn't wishful thinking that we're going to be in a position in a couple of years in fiscal 29 or 30 where we can't really go back to 60 million given the backlog of maintenance projects. So I understand that the idea here is to hopefully surge in the short run to address this backlog of preventive maintenance so that we don't have to incur even higher costs for it later on. But can you talk a little bit about that request and how you see us being able to get back to 60 million in a couple of years?
Yeah, well, thank you for the question, Delegate. So the proposed budget to the board shows 126 million. Now the board would have to analyze and decide if that's where they ultimately want to be by April. So a couple things on that. I would say at 126 million, we'd still be probably towards the lower end in the industry on using preventive maintenance dollars. So this is an allowable thing within inside the FTA, just to classify certain maintenance expenses as capital. So there's some agencies that would have hundreds of millions of dollars more actually in capital preventive maintenance seen as capital. 60 is definitely not an actual must be number. It has been we did it historically for a couple of years. So for us, it was more of a goal to say, is that generally the right number to be at? I would say there's no perfect number. In an ideal state, you shouldn't use any capital money. On the other hand, a lot of these expenses are, depending on how you treat them, are capitalized. But our goal here is to continue to drive use of capital dollars for capital renewal and then create more pay-go capital to get even more capital projects done without touching operating. So over the last couple of years, we've actually identified almost $500 million of cost savings across the board. And last year was a good example. We were able to come under budget by over $100 million. And a big part of that, we were able to rotate back into the capital program to reduce the capital backlog by almost 100 million, which therefore reduces the finance charges on that $100 million compounded as well. So our goal here is to come more and more every day to become more efficient delivering the capital program to make each dollar last longer.
That's a good segue into my last question, which is about the federal matching funds for the DMV moves requested additional 152 million in capital funds. So I just kind of want to make sure I understand how much does that leverage in additional federal funds if we increase 152 million in capital funds. And given the approach of the current federal administration to various funding issues, what are the prospects or guarantees that we're actually going to get that federal match if we increase the capital fund amount? Is this something that is set in stone in statute formula, or are there other considerations here? And I just kind of want to better understand the federal component of the matching for that 152 million additional funding.
Sure, great question. So I'll try to make it kind of condensed because there's a lot of layers to especially the federal piece. So one, I'll start off. We've had very good relationship with the current administration at USDOT and FTA. We've received multiple discretionary grants since this administration has been in place. So we continue to work well with them, and we're going to try to leverage every single dollar we can on the federal government. With that said, there's two types of general buckets. And of course, you're lucky that your Your acting secretary knows this stuff very well as well. But there's generally formula and discretionary. So, and neither one of those are really in relation to the D&B moves or the capital money. But put an asterisk, come back to it, this capital money can help leverage the second bucket. So formula is in place. Bill just happened on Congress. So from appropriations point of view, we're in pretty good spot here as a transit industry, Metro, MTA, and others. Now, what we were hoping to accomplish is with this D&B moves money, it's not only going to re-baseline and ensure we can have an actual revolving bond program, which is so important for predictable funding to run our program. It's going to set up with two things. One, there's a special amount of money we receive from the federal government called PREA, and that PREA amount is $150 million, and it's designed for kind of safety capital work in the rail system. And it came together in 2009. So the states all match a piece of that, and that's how that came together. What we're hoping here is, and nothing I say would be guaranteed here, but we've had some discussions on the Hill, and I think that there is a willingness to start engaging on what the federal amount of PREA is, knowing that it's lost a significant amount of its purchasing power. It has not been changed since 2009. 2010 is the first approach year, I believe. So this is kind of a symbolic action locally to say we're looking after our part, which helps us in our delegation then put a little bit more pressure across the Congress to say Congress must do its part. So started those conversations, and I'm cautiously optimistic by us passing D&B moves, we stand in a much better spot to push that. The second piece on leveraging federal dollars is this will give us local match for significant grant opportunities, which we really do not have today. So kind of like, I know Holly's up next, talking about the red line opportunity in Baltimore. For us, we don't have another rail line necessarily on the agenda, but the Capital Investment Grant Program does look after a program called Core Capacity. And our goal here is to modernize our rail system with upgraded signaling and move towards a higher level of automation. We do not right now have that local dollar match to go after the federal. And so D&B moves funding, this 152 in Maryland, would now ground us to have that to go after, upwards of 40% in federal, what's called capital investment grant funding opportunities. That also would work for like local bus rapid transit projects that there's a variety across this region that we would like to move forward as well. So once we have the money, it gives us the opportunity to then go leverage federal money. So again, that's not guaranteed. In legislation, there is a lot of money in the capital investment grant program, but it's competitive around the country. But we actually think we'll be in very, very good position to go after a lot of those dollars that regions around the country are getting. So hopefully that wasn't too long, but stitch the formula and discretionary together.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Spiegel. And I am looking for, where is she? Delegate Harrison, are you here?
Moving around.
I am. I don't know, Zoom, you got to speak back and forth.
There you are. Okay.
So I have, Madam Chair, if you don't mind, I have one clarifying question based on what he just said, and then I have two other questions unrelated. So, Mr. Clark, you said that with the 152 million that is being requested out of the 460 million from Maryland, that is a match to a federal grant of 152. Is that what you said early on?
No, ma'am. I'm sorry if that was confusing. So PREA just happens to be it's $150 million that Congress put together in 2009, 2010. That is a separate account. And I was saying that symbolically, D&B moves helps us with more leverage to say, we're stepping up locally. Please look after your part of PREA. The 152 is not about a match per se. It's about the second part is it is local funding that we could use for a larger capital investment grant program, such as rail modernization or bus rapid transit. And some of those projects could be anywhere from 60-40 local fed share to a small bus rapid transit. Sometimes could be, 80% federal. Mostly closer to 50-50, 40, 60-40 is generally the trend.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. My questions actually revolve around Metro Access. And while we're still trying to get back up to pre-pandemic levels, Metro Access has decreased by 26%. I guess its ridership has decreased by 26%. Do you have an idea of why?
Yes, ma'am. I can, I don't have the last month's ridership report in front of me, but ridership has increased pretty significantly on Metro Access, I would say, especially in the last year. So two things about Metro Access, I guess I would say is Metro Access, I guess I look at Metro Access more like an umbrella, of which one of the main drivers is what our service called Metro Access. And that is when we use our vehicles to provide those trips. And so those could be vans, sedans, things of that nature. The second part, though, is what we call Abilities Ride. And that is a program where we use a third-party provider where someone has the ability to book their trip kind of with less duration of notice. And they could use, we have a variety of nonprofit or even profit-based organizations that can then take people to their journey. And so that group is actually continued to grow because it's a higher level of convenience. It's actually a much lower cost for us to deliver as well. But overwhelmingly, people in the Metro Access Qualification Program are starting to want to use Abilities Ride. I think it's over 60% of the trips that we're delivering now on Abilities Ride versus traditional Metro Access. So we are seeing those trips continue to grow. The second part is we want our service, our fixed route service, to be at the highest quality where people have the most independence and then have the ability to use fixed rail and fixed bus. And part of this is we probably are seeing some people, as we continue to work on those fixed modes, be able to use that as well.
There was no, we have level funding. If I remember seeing this, it's level funding request for Metro Access. And so I'm putting Metro Access in that umbrella. That's your, I think you called it Metro Ability or Metro
Abilities Ride.
Abilities Ride. And so there, but there hasn't been a request for increased budget for that. And as I'm sure you are aware, Metro Access has historically had many complaints and problems. And the Abilities Ride, I think, may be a little challenged as well. So what's the quality of service and the responsiveness? And because I can tell you, just recently, I had a senior citizen that was in my presence that was attempting to use the Abilities Ride. She called it Uber, but it was the Abilities Ride. So that's your third party. And it was terrible. She was sitting there for, well over an hour trying to wait for a ride, but on hold with your service for at least 30 minutes. So you're not asking for increase in budget for that. And then there's still the problem with the level of service. Can you address that?
Yeah, so thanks for the question. So two things kind of connected here. So Maryland's subsidy is above 3% this year, and it's mostly driven by the cost of Metro Access. It's a significant driver of. So the way Metro Access works across the region is very different. How we do it in Virginia and DC and Maryland is very, very different. And for a variety of reasons. A good example, parts of Northern Virginia, localities have done their own version of a Metro Access in many ways to assist those individuals in those parts of the community. Whereas in Maryland, we are the provider. We're also the provider wherever Montgomery County or Prince George's County Transit goes. And so kind of adding to this complexity is when the bus in Prince George's and when the bus system in Montgomery County went fare free, we now have to replicate free fare where it is federally required to be equivalent in those areas. So not only are we not collecting the revenue from those trips, the cost and demand is continuing to increase. So on Maryland's side, the paratransit, if you will, element within inside of our budget is continuing to grow. And we've been spending, one of the board member that represents Maryland is Assistant Secretary McAndrew. and he's working very closely on that topic, I believe. Now the quality of service, second connected to that. Abilities right, I haven't heard very many issues at all with that. If you do have direct issues, I would love if you could pass those along to us, myself, Charlie Scott, we'd love to dig into those. With that said, on some of the core Metro Access service, last year, the first half of, if you will, calendar 2025, we definitely were not performing to the level that we wanted. That performance ended the year in a pretty good spot, about 90% on-time performance. Two things there. One, as traffic has continued to increase, that really has impacted our service delivery because traffic is very bad now, back to pre-COVID levels. And number two, we definitely had some contractor performance issues, and those have been dealt with through our procurement process to help balance out the responsibilities and hold the contractor accountable for those deliveries.
So I guess I'm mistaken because and I can't find it right now, but I thought that I saw that the Metro Access was at level funding as opposed to an increase. But then you also said that Metro Access the ridership has increased, but our document says that it has decreased or it's declined. So I don't know where the discrepancy is.
It could
Or
be
maybe I'm not understanding what it is that you're saying.
It could be, again, we might be saying the same, both things could be true just depending on timeline we're talking about. So I guess, are you saying reduce from a certain, like, I think it's the contemporaneousness of the data that we might be passing each other by. So we are growing Metro Access, like, if you will, 25 was higher ridership than 24. We expect 26 to continue to grow. Is that what the dates?
It says a fiscal 25 that ridership has declined.
Delegate Harrison, could you reference the page number, please?
Yes, please. Right on page 3, one of the key observations. Overall ridership continues to grow, but it declined for Metro Access for fiscal 25.
I'm sorry, Delegate. I think that's the breakdown between Metro Access and Abilities Ride. And one is labeled as in our brand of our delivered trips versus Abilities Ride, which is we use third parties. So I'd ask Charlie again to reach out to the analysts and make sure that those two things, I think they could be just being seen as two separate things, even though it's all within the paratransit program.
Yeah, and then also on page 4, basically, it says ridership has increased for Metro Rail and Metro Bus, but decreased by 26 abilities, ride and Metro Access. So there's definitely a discrepancy there.
Yes, and on page 4, that references 2020 to 2025. So again, I think this is just a contemporaneous of the date ranges between year over year versus the 5-year trend. But happy, Chair Watson, to have Charlie send an update to make sure that both Metro Access Abilities Ride are all combined together, both 5-year and year over year. So there's no discrepancy between, or no misunderstanding between the data.
Right. We would like that. We would
So
like.
it sounds like there needs to be a little bit of an update for several things. Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
It would be best, okay. It would be best to get us that information along with the chart that shows the differences over time. I think you have Exhibit 1 in there on page 5, but that was, it doesn't really list it doesn't list the exact numbers. It's just the chart without numbers. So that's the third thing we're going to need an update on from you guys. I'm sure someone's keeping track of that. Delegate Harrison, did you have any other questions? Delegate Metzger, do you have any questions? And while he's thinking, I will ask about proposed deficiencies. Do we have proposed deficiencies in this budget, Mr. Clark?
Could I get you to clarify what you mean by deficiencies, Chair? So,
well, you have the analyst has a chart on page 22, and it's your fiscal summary, and deficiency appropriations is what I'm asking about.
Gotcha. Thank you. We have so many different organizations and audits, so I just want to make sure.
Understood,
thank
understood,
you.
sorry.
Yeah, so I think what we're looking at on 22, if I stand corrected here by the analyst, is the year-over-year change on subsidy. And so, again, we have a proposed budget, not an adopted budget, and I believe this is showing this is the state level versus our budget. So I believe, and maybe Acting Secretary Thompson might be the correct one to address this, but I believe the state has allocated 3%. In the proposed budget that we've delivered to our board, Maryland's share is above 3%. Now, my understanding, again, I'm not the Maryland expert, is that is not abnormal, and then there's a reconciliation period inside of MDOT every year. What I again was suggesting earlier is that some of the growth above 3% is actually the Metro Access paratransit side of the operation, which ends up having a higher cost versus, say, Virginia and DC. So for us, we do a budget that grows by 3%, but it's not 3% equally across the region because it's based on, we have an operating formula and multiple capital formulas. So I think I can't speak to the appropriation side in Maryland, but I could speak to how we deliver our budget side. Hopefully that is helpful.
Okay, this is what we'll do. We'll ask the legislative analyst to explain that note on Appendix 1 on page 22. We'd like to know what the deficiency appropriations are that are mentioned in that note. And Ms. Norris, if you could coordinate these, I think we now have 4 things we're going to need from the analyst and WMATA together. Okay, so let's see. Do we have any other questions for WMATA? Delegate Spiegel.
I have just one more, Madam Chair. Mr. Clark, you talked about the update on additional on redevelopment opportunities for real estate at North Bethesda and Grosvenor, New Carrollton, and other places. Are there any others in the works that are worth highlighting at this point, or is it still too early to talk about any other real estate redevelopment opportunities in the portfolio?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think you probably mean Maryland specific, I would think, Delegate.
Yeah.
Because we are doing it across the whole region. Those are the ones we're really concentrated on. I think then there's one in Twin Brook that is, I believe at the board this month, actually, for public hearing, open to public hearing. And we've also had some pretty extensive conversations on the Blue Line corridor that we'd love to see come to fruition. A lot of this is obviously based on the capital market and development market. But I would reassure yourself and everyone on the committee, we want to activate these sites and as fast as possible. So Metro wants to be that partner and really turn some big parking lots into very usable housing and mixed use development for sure.
Great, thank you.
And we want to congratulate WMATA on your being Transit Agency of the Year in North America and your on-time performance improvements and the fact that we have the lowest crime rate there for this year. Those are really big accomplishments. We appreciate you being here and appreciate your time. If you could work with legislative analysts to provide us with that information as soon as possible, we would appreciate it. And we did have some written testimony provided in support of your budget, but we don't have anyone here to testify orally. So with that, we are finished with our WMATA hearing. We thank you very much for your attendance.
Thank you very much, Chair, and you give me my commitment. Charlie will start working on this as soon as the hearing is over.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
All right, committee members, we are moving on now to the Maryland Transit Administration, and we have analyst Samuel Quist with us to provide his analysis.
Good afternoon. Thank you. Yes, on page 1 of the analysis, the operating budget for MTA increases by $71.1 million or 5.4% to $1.4 billion. On page 2 of the analysis, the capital budget increases by $125.9 million or 15.8% to $921.6 million. Turning to the performance section of the analysis, Exhibit 1 on page 7 shows data on MTA ridership over the past several years. You can see that Although ridership continued to increase in fiscal 2025 and was about an increase of 9% higher than the previous year, 2025 ridership was still roughly about 75% of the fiscal 2019 ridership prior to the pandemic. On page 8 of the analysis, Exhibit 2 shows data on on-time performance. On-time performance was roughly similar in 2025 to fiscal 2024 and ranged from 73% for bus service to 94% for mobility service. However, not mobility service on-time performance was the only mode which exceeded the goal for on-time performance. Exhibit 3 on page 9 shows data on farebox recovery. Farebox recovery ranged from a low of 2% for Metro to a high of 15% for Washington commuter bus service in fiscal 2025. You can see here that the largest increase in 2025 was for MARC train and commuter bus service. Next, I'm going to turn ahead to page 14, Exhibit 6, which shows the overview of fiscal 2027 spending. You can see from this pie chart that slightly over half of the operating budget supports bus operations, while around a quarter supports rail operations, which include light rail, the Baltimore Metro system, and MARC train service. And then the remaining roughly a quarter supports MTA administration and the statewide program, which includes funding for locally operated transit systems. Exhibit 7 on pages 15 and 16 provides details on the proposed budget changes. Overall, the operating budget increases by 71.1 million. The largest components of that increase include personnel expenses, which grow by about 33.7 million due to a net increase of 104 positions in the budget, and transit service contracts, which grow by about $28.9 million related to increases in contracts for mobility paratransit, commuter bus service, and MARC train service. On the bottom of page 16 and the top of page 17 is more discussion of personnel data. So as I just mentioned, there's a net increase of about 104 new positions in the fiscal 27 allowance. Although there are actually 139 new positions added in the fiscal 27 allowance, there's a reduction of about 35 positions, which results in that net increase of 104. As with other MDOT modes, there are positions transferred out of MTA to the MDOT Secretary's office as part of an agency-wide IT consolidation effort. And then within those 139 new positions, the majority of those, about 134 of those, are for new MTA and related police positions for the Purple Line to allow the training and recruitment for those to begin in anticipation of the opening of the Purple Line. There are also 5 new positions for the MTA apprenticeship program. Now turning to the capital program for MTA, exhibit number 8 on page 18 provides a list of federal discretionary grants that have been awarded to MTA between federal fiscal 21 and 25. These total approximately $7.3 billion. And you can see that the majority of those, there are 2 large grants, one for the Frederick Douglass Tunnel project and the other for the Susquehanna River Bridge replacement. In addition to those awarded grants, at the top of the chart, there's roughly $6.5 million in additional federal grants that MTA has applied for which are currently pending a decision on. Page 19, Exhibit 9 shows the breakdown of programmed capital spending for MTA in the current MDOT Consolidated Transportation Plan. This totals about $5.7 billion over the 6-year period. The majority of funding, about 57% over the 6-year period, is for system preservation projects. Details on the fiscal 27 capital program are shown on pages 20 and 21. Fiscal 27 capital spending is approximately $965.5 million. And you can see at the top of the chart on page 20, the largest share of capital funding in fiscal 27 is for the purple line, about $240.6 million. The other largest capital funding is programmed for the Red Line project, the light rail modernization project, the metro rail car and system overhauls and replacement, and the Frederick Douglass Tunnel, which round out the top 5. Next, on page 22, there's a chart showing changes in capital cash flows from fiscal 26 as introduced to the fiscal 26 working appropriation and the fiscal 27 allowance. And then there's a breakdown on the next 2 exhibits of the changes by project between those years. Exhibit 12 on page 23 and 24 shows that between the fiscal 26 allowance and the 26 working appropriation, there's an increase of $57.3 million. At the top of the chart, you can see the biggest increase was to bus procurement and the Purple Line project. And then in fiscal 26 to 27, is shown in Exhibit 13 on pages 25 and 26. There was a $133 million increase in total. The largest increases were for the Frederick Douglass Tunnel project, bus procurement, and the light rail modernization program. On page 27 and 28, there's discussion of first year capital funding in MTA. Exhibit 14 shows that about 16% of fiscal 27 funding was for first year funding, while 84% was for ongoing funding. And then Exhibit 15 on pages 28 and 29 shows a breakdown of the individual projects receiving first year funding in fiscal 26 and 27. At the bottom of page 29, there is a note about significant changes from last year's CTP for MTA. There's one new project which is added to the development and evaluation project. The 5th Division bus project has about $14.6 million in total programmed to begin the development and evaluation efforts for that project. Besides that, there were no other projects that were added or removed to the MTA CTP compared to last year's CTP. Turning to the issues section of the analysis, which begins on page 30. The first issue is a discussion of additional details on the Purple Line, the Red Line, and the light rail modernization program, which are 3 of the largest shares of the MTA capital program. Starting with the light rail project, the Purple Line light rail project, as of November 2025, the project is over 87% complete. The current opening date is now anticipated at January of 2028. Major construction continues on that. DLS is recommending that committee narrative be adopted, which continues to request bi-monthly construction status reports, has been supplied by MDOT to the budget committees over the past couple years to continue to provide updates on that project. Next, there's discussion of the Red Line project on page 31. The current CTP program is about $78.9 million for the Red Line in fiscal 2027 for preliminary design and engineering efforts. The analysis asks MTA to comment more on what the planned usages of those funds are in fiscal 27, particularly in light of the fact that the federal permitting process of the Red Line was paused earlier this summer. DLS is also recommending committee narrative, which would request MTA to provide a report later this year to provide a more detailed update on the next steps for the Red Line project. Then on the top of page 32, there's a little bit more discussion on the light rail modernization program, which is a $1.4 billion total project to overhaul the MTA light rail system. There was initial construction funding programmed in the fiscal 26 capital budget with additional funding in 27 and continuing on in future years for that project. The second issue that's discussed in the analysis on the bottom of page 32 and continuing on to page 33 is discussion of the work group on the reorganization of MTA. This was a work group that was established by legislation enacted by the General Assembly last session. And the work group met about 5 times over the 2025 interim, looking at studying potentials for reorganization of the administration of the transit services that are operated by MTA and administered by MTA. The work group was required to submit a report to the General Assembly, which it did so, summarizing the work group's activities and recommendations. And there's been legislation introduced in both the House and the Senate this year, which would effectuate the recommendations of the work group. At the bottom of page 33, there's the bold language there in the analysis. DLS is recommending that the funding in the budget bill, last year's budget bill, which restricted funding in MDOT pending the receipt of that work group report, be released as the report that was submitted met the requirements of the budget bill language. DLS will process a letter to that effect if there are no objections raised during these budget hearings for MTA. Then the third issue that's discussed in the analysis beginning on page 34 is discussion of the MTA capital needs inventory assessment. This is a 10-year report of the capital needs for MTA that's issued every 3 years. The current edition of this report was released in July 2025 and covers the 10-year period of fiscal 26 through 2035. Exhibit 16 on the bottom of page 34 that shows a breakdown of the 10-year total capital needs as reported. About 67% or 6.6 billion of the total is for state of good repair needs, which breaks down to about 660 million annually over that 10-year period. Exhibits 17 and 18 on pages 36 and 37 break down the state of good repair needs by asset category and by mode. So on page 36, you can see the largest share of state of good repair needs are for vehicles. These include things like metro, light rail, and vehicles, MARC train, locomotives and rail cars, buses. And then on page 37, exhibit 18, you can see the largest share of state of good repair needs by mode are for metro at 31%, followed by core bus 23%, light rail 21%. The report concludes that of the $6.6 billion in total state of good repair needs identified over the next 10 years, approximately 5.1 to 6.1 billion in funding is projected to be available over that period, which would result in a funding gap over the 10-year period of about 500 million to 1.5 billion, which depends on the actual funding available beyond the current CTP period. However, the report finds that the current capital funding programmed in the CTP will allow MTA to reduce its state of good repair backlog by about 45% over the next 5 years. Turning now to the DLS recommended actions, which are shown on pages 38 and 39. For the operating budget, the first recommended action, DLS is recommending deleting funding for 5 of the new apprenticeship positions in the 2027 budget and recommends instead funding those through repurposing existing vacant positions. The second recommended action is to adopt committee narrative, continuing to request bi-monthly status reports on the Purple Line project. The third recommended action is to adopt committee narrative requesting a report on the Purple Line project status and timeline. And then for the capital program, DLS is recommending to concur with the governor's allowance. I'm going to conclude the presentation there, but I would just note for reference, there's an additional discussion on pages 40 and 40 through 43 on the Central Maryland Regional Transit Plan, MARC train service expansion planning, and the MTA Cybersecurity Administration. But I'll stop there and I can take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Quist, as always. That was a very long report that we were given, so we appreciate you being able to synthesize it as briefly as you did. And now I will open this up to questions from our members. Who would like to go first?
Madam, should we hear from MDOT? MTA first?
That is an excellent suggestion. Thank you.
We are happy to do that.
Yes, we have Secretary Katie Thompson here and Administrator Holly Arnold. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Chair Watson and members of the committee. Again, for the record, I'm Katie Thompson, Acting Secretary of Transportation, and I'm joined somewhere on screen by Administrator Holly Arnold from the Maryland Transit Administration. We appreciate the opportunity to testify today, and again, we also appreciate the detailed analysis from Mr. Quist. Transit is critical for riders across Maryland and vital to the economic success of the state. Every day, hundreds of thousands of Marylanders rely on MTA to access jobs, education, medical appointments, and other services. Thanks to Governor Moore's leadership, transit in Maryland is being prioritized and is poised for long-term success. And we're pleased that we have the right team in place to meet the moment. Over the past year, MTA has had many accomplishments, and I'd like to highlight just a few. On my very first day as acting secretary, I was able to join in the unveiling of MTA's new Metro rail cars that are assembled at a manufacturing facility in Hagerstown. These new rail cars that are made here in America and here in Maryland represent a significant investment that will create a modern, reliable, and safe Metro experience that residents and employers can rely on. We're also making significant progress on the Purple Line. It's now more than 87% complete, and we've received all 28 light rail vehicles at our operations and maintenance facility in Glen Ridge. This is a major milestone for the Purple Line, which is a vital connection that will knit communities together, ease congestion, promote public transit, and link riders to 21 stations and key destinations across the corridor. These two major projects are part of many efforts designed to transform transit across Maryland. MTA has been working on a lot of other things this past year, and I can assure you that there is more to come. The future of transit in Maryland is bright. With that, I'll turn it over to Administrator Arnold to provide some additional information and address the DLS analysis. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. And Administrator Arnold.
Hey, good afternoon, Chair Watson, members of the committee. Thank you for the introduction, Secretary Thompson. For the record, my name is Holly Arnold, and I'm the administrator at the Maryland Transit Administration. And thank you for the opportunity to be here today to discuss the MTA. I also want to thank Sam for his work with us throughout the year and for his very thorough analysis. So we appreciate his time on that. And I'd like to thank the General Assembly and the Moore-Miller administration. The funding in last year's budget has been crucial to the agency. And because of that, we've been able to advance a number of important capital investments across the entire system. We're thrilled about the launch of our light rail modernization program, a fully funded $1.4 billion investment in light rail vehicles, signal systems, stations, track, and maintenance facilities. This is the first major investment since the light rail system was initially built in the early 90s. It's going to allow for faster, safer, and more accessible service. We are now in market for the majority of the program, and we've seen a lot of interest within the industry. We're also prioritizing public safety, and we've been investing in making sure our riders and our employees are safe. Thanks to the General Assembly, last year, we did implement a rider code of conduct and our exclusion policy, in addition to launching our CSAY app, which allows our riders to discreetly report safety concerns in real time to MTA police. In 2025, there were no homicides or rapes reported on the MTA system, and serious crimes are down 50% over the prior decade. We're also positioning the state for future transit success. As we've outlined in our Be More Bus Plan and our MARC Growth and Transformation Plan, greater levels of service that could be possible through additional future resources. Through the first year of the MARC Growth and Transformation Plan, we've seen momentum on several key near-term initiatives, including improvements at Martin State Airport Station and the Martin Maintenance Yard, and the completion of a feasibility study for a third track along the Brunswick line. As the Secretary mentioned, this Purple Line continues to make significant progress, and we've been happy to see increased business engagement along the corridor, including MDOT's Small Business Grant Program, which last year awarded $2 million in grants to nearly 200 small businesses, most directly impacted by construction. In addition to planning and projects on the ground, MTA has been highly focused on improving our budget performance, both on the operating and the capital side. In FY25, MTA closed its operating budget within 0.2% of our spending plan, and we closed our capital budget at 97% of our final TTP allocation. Spending on our state of good repair and enhancement has increased 24% year over year and has grown each year since FY21. Investment in the MTA has significant economic impacts throughout the state, and 80% of our budget is spent here in Maryland. As the Secretary mentioned, our new Metro rail cars are being assembled in Hagerstown, and the components are being shipped in through the Port of Baltimore. Meanwhile, our other MTA supplies are being sourced from across the state. We get brake pads, which are made in Westminster. We have bus lifts that are purchased from Stevensville. And at MTA, we're ensuring that transit in Maryland is a good investment and that the future of transit throughout our state is well positioned to succeed. I do want to thank the entire team at MTA for their outstanding work. It truly matters. Turning now to the DLS analysis, MTA was asked to provide an update on the status of grant agreements and funding distribution for the Maryland Senior Rides program. As of the end of January, all of our FY26 Senior Ride grant agreements have been signed by MTA and distributed to the recipients for their final execution. It does vary among the recipients, but we're working closely with them to make sure that they can get executed, because once they are fully executed, they can submit their eligible expenses for reimbursement. We were also asked to comment on the planned uses of capital funding for the Red Line in fiscal 27. And so our Red Line fiscal 27 budget focuses on answering key questions about the project scope to identify our concept design, or what's known as the preferred alternative, that will advance through the Federal Transit Administration's Capital Investment Grant Program. This includes planning, preliminary engineering, traffic analysis, field community engagement, and administrative support to the program. The goal here is to position the Red Line for future grant funding eligibility, as well as making sure we're ready for engineering and construction. The NEPA pause that was mentioned is administrative in nature and hasn't affected our ongoing technical work to determine our preferred alternative. We've coordinated this closely with FTA to make sure that we have a good assessment of our current scoping questions And then once we're in a good spot, we'll establish that corresponding timeline that incorporates the work. We do concur with providing a report outlining the project's timelines, next steps, and projected funding needs and sources. On the operating budget in action, we do respectfully disagree with the proposal to delete the funding for the 5 new apprenticeship positions. If we were in person, I would bring an apprentice with me, but not doing that virtually. But I want to speak on behalf of the program. We did launch it in October 2024, and thank you for the General Assembly for the pins that were provided. We currently have 10 apprentices enrolled in the 3-year program, and they are on track to graduate in April 2027 as full mechanics into union positions at MTA. The additional pins that we're asking for will allow us to bring a cohort this fall. We have a new class starting every 2 years and creating a solid pipeline for the agency. While we do have other vacancies, we are in active recruitment for pretty much every vacancy we have, and moving pins from another department would mean that we don't have the resources to complete their responsibilities. The apprenticeship program has been a really great success. We'd like to expand it to other departments as well, and we appreciate the support from the General Assembly to get to this point. So I will stop there. Didn't see any further questions from the DLS analyst, so we concur with the remaining recommendations, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Administrator Arnold. Let me just follow up, since you just mentioned the pins that DLS suggested you use from other sources. That program, do you call it intern program? What do you call it?
Apprenticeship program.
Apprenticeship program, right. So it's 6 positions every 2 years is what you're thinking, and that's $300,000 in this year's budget.
So the goal is actually, we would like to have 20 positions total for the group of apprentices. And if we cycle it every 2 years, essentially 20 is all we need.
Okay.
So we can have 10 graduating, recruit for that next 10. We're going 5 this time, so it'll get 15. The goal would be to eventually grow that so that that class could be 10. So essentially 10 and 10 in the class at any given time. And then when they graduate, they will go into other MTA pins.
So you would be bringing in a new class of 10.
A new class, that's the goal for every 2 years. Yeah.
And you can do that for $300,000?
Yes.
Okay. It seems like a good use of the funds to me, but we'll talk about it further. And let's see, who would like to begin on this one? I see Delegate Edelson back from, or temporarily back from maternity leave just for MTA. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's great to be temporarily back. If there's anything my wife gives me an exception for, it's MTA. So
you may begin with your questions.
Okay, great. Good to see everybody. It's been a little while since I got some good sleep, so I apologize if my questions are a little not congruent, but great to see you, Secretary Thompson, Administrator Arnold. Thank you so much for everything that you all do for all of our constituents. A few questions that I have for you. One is on the light rail modernization program, obviously an extremely exciting project. Wanted to get a sense from you on, kind of as we stand today, how we look at the status of that project, particularly I think with the focus on Howard Street, which is such an Achilles heel of the light rail program, currently, both for businesses and for moving people effectively up and down the line. I know there's been meetings with a lot of local organizations and just wanted to get a sense of sort of where we stand on that and what the next steps are.
Yeah, absolutely. And first, congratulations. And I'm
Thank you.
thrilled that MTA is your favorite of the named agencies here today.
I try not to tell the others, but this is public now, so.
No, and again, appreciate the support for the light rail modernization program, and it really is critical to the agency. So first, just overall step on kind of where we are. As I mentioned previously, we wanted to get in market as quickly as possible. There are 4 different kind of tranches of contracts that we're going for, and we are in market already for 3 of those. Our traction power substations, which is the electrical system to make it work, we've received bids on already, and those are in evaluation. For the vehicles and the train control, we anticipate getting bids due later, kind of late spring, early summer. We're working closely with the market to get the date there, and the goal would be to make an award toward the end of the year. And then for the stations, which would include the Howard Street work, we're doing a progressive design build program, and so it's a 2-step procurement. So we did a request for qualifications, and that is being evaluated now, where we got some really good bids there. As part of that, we are also working closely with city agencies and other kind of external stakeholders to make sure that we have a good understanding of what's in the scope and what's not, because with progressive design build, you do need to know kind of where you're going with it. And so those have been really productive meetings. We actually have our next meeting with the city agencies later this week, and we anticipate a robust conversation there. And we want to do a meeting for external stakeholders later in March. So look out for an invitation to that one. Our goal is to see if there's some improvements that we can make actually prior to the design build. We think there's some left turn removals, restriping, signage, lagging left turns versus I'm not a traffic engineer. Basically, I want the cars to go after the trains. Will make a big difference in terms of speeding up Howard Street, because as you said, we do have to fix the Howard Street problem in order to make light rail successful.
Got it. Maybe we should all get stuff hung in our offices that says the car should go off to the train, and that should just be our general mantra.
That's my official traffic engineer, non-traffic engineer speak there.
That's great. I appreciate that. And then, if I may, Madam Chair, just a couple more. Focusing specifically on state of good repair, such incredible strides there on how that money is being spent. It wasn't long ago that we were in the 60, 70% range of funds being spent down on state of good repair. And now, as you just mentioned, we're in the high 90s, both on capital and operating, which is fantastic. I guess the question I have is, to what extent is that sort of one big chunk of the light rail modernization project versus, sort of a new way of doing things in which we are spending state of good repair funds across the system at such a higher rate of return on that?
Yeah, great question. We've really been focusing on changing how we look at our projects and how we look at our procurements across the board. And again, I want to thank the General Assembly. You guys have been very gracious in giving us additional pins over the past few years, and we've added some positions in procurement in particular, because that was one area that was a bit of a bottleneck for us, as well as in kind of our planning and engineering teams. The one other thing we did is a few years ago, we set up a program management oversight office to help on the rail nodes to better coordinate projects. Because when I came into this role, what was happening is we would do a project on light rail on Howard Street and we would do a shutdown, but we weren't fixing all the things. So then it would turn out, hey, next year we got to come back and shut down that same area, which is really frustrating for riders, makes it hard to be reliable. And so that program management group now has a 5-year look ahead for what projects we're planning. And we see on an annual basis, here's the projects that are planned. And they're making sure that they're bundling both the larger kind of capital projects as well as the smaller day-to-day things our maintenance away crews can do. We're also taking a look at some of those larger projects to see if our crews can do them through routine maintenance. So there's one major project that we were looking at spending $50 million on, an interlocking replacement, and we believe that our crews can do it through regular preventive maintenance, and so we're able to save money there and make sure that we're focusing on making sure that the system is reliable, but not necessarily shutting down or spending on large capital projects. So it really is just a different way of thinking and doing our projects at the agency.
Great. Be More Bus, such a big idea, plan, goal for the city and the region. I suspect that is why, or one of the reasons why, we have so many amazing advocates and stakeholders in the meeting today who are here to reiterate as loudly and as clearly as possible the critical nature of funding the Be More Bus plan. It's about a $1.1 billion price tag. I know that's broken up into about, estimated about 650 million is for the 5th bus division. The rest is for sort of the operating improvements. What I'd love to get a sense of from you, Madam Administrator, is, if we are able as the Moore Miller administration and the General Assembly to come together and answer the call of all of the incredible advocates here and all of the riders who depend on us to fully fund the Be More Bus plan, what does that look like for the everyday rider on the MTA system, for the student trying to get to school on time, for the single mom trying to get her kids to the doctor, for the parents working multiple jobs who rely on our bus system? Help me understand exactly how fully funding and implementing the Be More Bus system will really change the success of the bus system in the Baltimore region.
Yeah, thank you, Delegate, and I appreciate the support for the plan. I do know it is a vision plan. We wanted to lay out, what that vision could be to meaningfully improve access across the region. And I do want to, thank the Secretary. The current CTP has 14.5 million in it as really a down payment, so that we can advance activities toward purchasing the property, because that is an important first step. We need a place to put a bus division. Overall, I mean, we did go talk to our riders and non-riders in terms of like what they want to see from the system, what would make them ride more, and what we heard across the board was frequency. More frequency during the day, more frequency late night, more frequency on the weekends. Some desire to go to additional places, but by and large, people just want buses to come more frequently. So the plan reflects that. We look at improved weekday, weekend, and overnight frequencies in the existing network, some new and realigned routes, and a new quick link service. The goal is buses that arrive a minimum of every 30 minutes or better on the weekdays and on weekends, plus buses that arrive every 10 minutes or better on 7 of our routes. Express bus service really kind of across the region, 25% more of our dedicated school tripper buses, and then additional service, more connections to places like Trade Point Atlantic. Overall, I don't have a specific numbers here, but in terms of access to job centers, it's a huge improvement in the number of jobs that you would be able to access through the frequent network.
Okay, I appreciate that. But I guess what I'm hearing from you too is that as we move forward with it, we will need to put some more sort of meat on the bone and really flesh out the details of how to get it from the vision plan to a next step of something that's really ready to implement. And I look forward to working with you on that, and hopefully to getting the funding necessary to make it a reality, because I think so many people are counting on us to do so.
Thank you.
Just one final one, if I may, Madam Chair, and then I'm done, I promise. Which is the Red Line. It was announced by the governor in 2023 that we were reviving the Red Line. A chosen mode was announced in June of 2024, and it's now February of 2026. And certainly there are no shovels in the ground. There's still a lot of things that need to be done before the project is meaningfully moved forward. It's sort of a two-part question. One is, where are we with it? And two, you mentioned the importance of getting everything in line for FTA funding. I think we all know we're dealing with an administration in DC that is not particularly enamored with funding a light rail project in Baltimore City right now, unfortunately. So assuming a scenario in which the feds are not going to be there to help us in this, what are our realistic options to build a real Red Line project for the Baltimore region?
Yeah, thank you for that question. And again, appreciate the support for the Red Line. It is a priority for the administration and for MTA, and we're committed to continuing to push it forward. We do have allocated the 158 million to continue our planning and preliminary engineering. And so, kind of to date, current progress, we've completed about 90% of the field survey and geotechnical borings needed for future design and construction. We have our alternatives analysis for the light rail alternatives nearing completion, and we looked at over 20 different kind of alternatives in the Canton Crossing area. We're continuing with our environmental documentation and community engagement, and we're at about a 10% design so that we can look at feasibility. As you know, there are financial headwinds, especially at the federal administration, and there's been some changes in the capital investment grant program that we're obviously monitoring closely. We want to make sure that we are having a conversation with the community about the best path forward for the project. We want to make sure that we're looking at all possible alternatives, kind of keeping everything on the table, because we know the importance of getting people from east to west and making sure that it's happening quickly. So we anticipate, hopefully having some more community conversations later this year as we advance to the next steps in the project.
Okay, I will leave it there for now. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Delegate Harrison.
Thank you so much. Just a couple of quick questions. The first I wanted to ask you about the apprenticeships. What are these positions? Are they bus drivers? Are they Maintenance, what are the positions that are that the individuals are in the program for?
So it's our bus maintenance apprenticeship program.
Bus maintenance, okay.
We have the 10 that are in the program now. And I will note, because I do see them on the screen here, was developed in partnership with our union and has been blessed by the Maryland Department of Labor as an official kind of apprentice program.
Okay.
And it really is kind of a true partnership that we're working with them on.
Okay, that's fine. I want to move on actually to the audit findings, the audit. You have a repeat finding one about not establishing adequate controls over certain aspects of your personnel. And I know that you had a response to that. But I think you said that I'm sorry, that you will implement monthly review process of the critical personnel, and you're going to do training and monitoring to ensure that the timely submission of forms. Where are you with that? What's the status? I mean, because that's a repeat finding, and if you're going to, why wasn't this already done?
Yeah, so this is as you know, a repeat finding. We have put in place the kind of monthly tracking to make those adjustments. We've also made some changes in our human resources department where we kind of split it up into two different sides. One is focused on kind of the benefits, things like that, and the other one is more focused on recruitment, employment services. And so we have the two deputy directors that are working there. MTA is a large agency, and unlike most state agencies, we have our own payroll system and we have our own pension. So it's more complex than what a lot of agencies deal with. And so we think that this change to our human resources department will enable us to better track those things. We also I have monthly check-ins with our audits team to ensure that we're making progress on these findings to ensure that we're not going to have repeat findings again.
Okay, and then just one other, I wanted to ask about on the second finding, the third-party administrator for healthcare.
Mm-hmm.
And you indicated that you will establish this and you will conduct something that, and you will seek to recover payments. What's the status on that? The audit was done in May, and what's your status on that right now? On what you plan to do?
Yeah, so we're working on bringing on a auditor to do the audit for us. We don't have the staff to audit all the kind of healthcare claims. There's been some discussion about can the auditor work for us or not. We believe that the auditor can because they do sign off that they're independent, and so we're working through that. And the goal is to have the audit firm on and complete by the end of this year.
This calendar year or this fiscal year?
Calendar year.
It's going to take that long to get an auditor?
To bring on a third-party auditor, we don't have an auditing contract, and so we're working to make sure that we go through the procurement process because I don't want to have a finding for procurement, and so that we can bring them on to do the audit. I will note that our vendor does audits, so they do monthly or they do regular audits that we see copies of, but the desire for the DLS was to have was to have our own external auditors do the work.
So if you don't have an auditor until the end of the year, let's just say it takes that long, you're going to end up with a repeat finding next year because it's only like a month or two before we're right back here. So 2027 will come around very quickly.
So again, the goal is to have the audit complete by the end of the year, not to have the auditor on board.
I'm sorry?
The goal is to have the audit fully, not just to have the auditor on board, but to have the audit complete by the end of the calendar year.
Okay, so then by the time DLS meets with you and goes over everything, that should be
we should be on track to have that complete.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Delegate Spiegel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Our colleagues have asked a number of the questions that I was going to ask about audits and some other capital expenditures, but I did want to ask about a personnel question, in particular, MTA police positions for the Purple Line. And since about roughly half of the 71 million allowance increase for fiscal year 27 is for personnel, and that includes a projected 134 positions for Purple Line policing, which is significant. I know that MTA and MDOT provided a JCR report back in December on security cooperation updates, discussion of MOUs with WMATA. I was just wondering if there's any update to those discussions as policymakers are looking at the possibilities of having WMATA perform some of the policing functions for the Purple Line.
Yeah, so conversations with WMATA are ongoing. We actually have a meeting later this week to discuss. We've met a couple times. I think everyone has acknowledged that it's legally complex and physically complex, but we're committed to seeing if we can work out a path forward. I should have a better sense after the end of this week when we meet with WMATA again in terms of if that's feasible or if we need to continue down this path.
Thank you. Look forward to hearing the update.
Yep, happy to give you an update. Thanks.
Thank you, Delegate Spiegel. I will jump in with, let's see, is Ms. Delegate Metzger, do you have anything you'd like to ask? You're fine. Okay. You, on page 13 of the legislative analysis, they discuss deficiency appropriations. Can you tell us what those two deficiency appropriations are for and how they occurred? Page 13.
Sorry, it's taking me a minute to get
It's okay.
there.
So take your time.
Okay, so the two deficiencies. So essentially, it's actually kind of a net that offsets. So the first was for fare collection. So we had anticipated using COPS funding, which is certificate of payment, I believe, different type of bonds funding to pay for our fare collection program. Due to a number of issues that we were having with the vendor, we actually ended up canceling that procurement and are taking a different path. So the anticipated the 4.7 million has been reduced.
Right.
And then the other piece of that is the increase on paratransit and commuter bus. It is primarily paratransit. We continue to see increased demand for our paratransit services, in particular call a ride. And obviously we cannot deny those rides. We need to continue to provide them. And so we've seen increased costs associated with our paratransit services.
Okay, so the 4.7 million is deducted from the budget, and then you're adding 12.2 million for paratransit services and to reduce commuter bus service. So on that 12.2 million, does it relate back to the audit finding on call a ride, where the auditors believed that you were charging, or that you were paying more than the maximum rate? Can you explain if that is related to the audit finding?
So first, let me say no, not related to the audit finding. It's related to demand and our paratransit ride is above pre-pandemic levels, and we continue to see growing demand in paratransit, higher than some of where we're seeing in some of the other modes across our agency.
Okay, but didn't you say in your explanation that there was some that had something to do with call a ride?
Yeah, sorry, I'm lumping call a ride because it is part of paratransit. So it's just overall demand. I will note that audit finding, we have disagreed with that audit finding. What we did was during, if you remember the summer of 2021, when our paratransit service was at 58% on-time performance, one of the things that we did at that time was increase the basically how far someone could travel on call a ride. So it was $20. They paid the first 3, and then we paid 20, and then we increased that to 40. The advice that we had received from our OAG at the time was that did not require a change to the contract. Later on, we did end up taking it. So it's a bit of a disagreement in terms of was that a finding or was it not? But overall, it's just an increase into the subsidy on the call a ride, not kind of overall for how we're managing the program.
Okay, increasing the subsidy, but that is not, you're saying that is not related to the proposed deficiency.
I mean, increasing the subsidy, which we did 3 years ago, is part of that.
Right.
But overall,
Right.
our costs continue to increase as our ridership is growing.
Okay, would it be possible just to get a breakdown of that 12.2 million, either from legislative services, working in conjunction with MTA? That would be great.
Yep, we'd be happy to work with them on that.
Thank you. Just wanted to get your opinion on the MTA work group and the restructuring, the bill that's coming in. I think it's 1013?
1081.
1081. You know it off the top of your head, of course.
We're working on letters. So yeah, MTA and the department will be supporting the bill. So I will be joining Chair Corman on Thursday, I believe it is.
Mhm.
Hopefully in person and not virtual, as much as I love seeing you all on a screen. So yeah, I mean, I think it was a good work group. We appreciated working with the team from DLS. Always enjoy getting to work with Sam. It went through the complexities of the agency, how we operate today, some of the kind of difficulties of breaking up the agency, and I think we landed in a really good spot that has some great things for the agency that will help in terms of procurement reform, tort reform, helping to purchase property. As well as competitive salaries. And we're committed to making sure that we're working closely with the boards and the General Assembly to make this work.
So when the work group first came together, the idea was to break MTA apart. But what the work group came to the conclusion of was that was going to be difficult to do for a lot of reasons. And so instead, they're offering 2 additional boards and some breakup of responsibilities to make sure that the focus is better on each area. Is that
I think that's a very good short summary. Yes.
Yeah, I'm sure after 5 meetings, it was a lot more complex than that. Okay, well, we look forward to hearing from you on that on Wednesday, or I think, or Thursday. I noted something really important that no one's mentioned that was in your report, and that was that there were, if I'm restating it correctly, there were 200 lives saved on MTA with Narcan.
Mhm.
And is that in 1 year?
Yes. That's 1 year. MTA Police have partnered with the Department of Health for a number of years to carry and administer Narcan, and I'm really proud of the lives that they've saved. We also partnered with Baltimore City this past year to make sure that we're providing Narcan in our metro stations. So anyone walking by, if they want to carry it with them, they're welcome to get it at the stations. And then we recently started offering optional training for our operators. Anyone who wants to get the training on it can come to our divisions and be trained by experts on how to use it. Not making it mandatory, but we do have a lot of operators who want to help. They see things happening in the community, and so it's been a good option for us to make sure that we're helping.
Yeah. That's really great news. Thank you. Last question from me is on the fare box recovery percentages. Is there a way that you could work with Department of Legislative Services to give us that information? I mean, it's not, is it in the legislative analysis? We couldn't find it, or maybe we just missed it, but Mr. Quist, where is the fare box recovery discussed in the analysis?
So it is in the analysis on, let me just 1 second, let me find that.
I think page 9.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, page 9 of the analysis. So we do have the data on that. I believe it's in the MFR data for MDOT.
Right.
So I believe that DLS has that data. It's just the percentages aren't shown in the report.
Yeah, I think that was what the issue was. The exact percentages are not listed. And actually, Mr. Quist, if you could just send that to our council, that would be great for Metro, Light Rail, Bus, and Move. Any other questions from committee members before we get to testimony? Delegate Edelson, you have nothing else?
I have a million other things, but in the interest of everybody's time, I want to be fair to everybody.
Okay, I
Thank you
am
very
looking
much, yeah.
for our list. Here it is. We have several people signed up to testify, and I'm going to read the first 3 names, and you can get ready. The first is John Laria from the Baltimore Regional Transit Commission, Mike Vinus and Robin Budish. Mr. Laria, are you with us?
I am with you. Can you hear me?
Yes. And your time limit is being timed by someone. I believe it is 2 minutes. Am I correct? Yes. Thank you, Mr. Laria.
All right. Chair Watson, members of the subcommittee, I'm John Laria, Chair of the Baltimore Regional Transit Commission. As you probably know, the commission was created by the General Assembly to provide oversight, accountability, and especially advocacy for MTA's Baltimore Region transit system and to advise the state on the delivery of reliable, equitable, and modern transit in Central Maryland. I do want to salute MTA's leadership and many excellent employees for their hard work and professionalism, sometimes in very challenging circumstances. So I really do appreciate that on behalf of the commission. As the BRTC chair, I'm not here obviously as MTA or as an external stakeholder, but in some respects, I think of myself as an agent, your eyes and ears, in advising about MTA, and today that means the budget. And as you know, Baltimore's transit system is uniquely dependent on state capital investment, unlike WMATA, and there's no doubt that the new transportation revenues enacted in the last session are making a difference, and we're very grateful. But they were, as described by many last session, a good, quote, down payment, which allows MTA to continue advancing long-deferred state of good repair needs and maintain progress on major system modernization, especially light rail modernization. But they don't allow for system enhancement or much-needed expansion. And to that end, MTA has produced, and you heard, ambitious but achievable transit plans, including the Regional Transit Plan update, the MARC Growth and Transformation Plan, and the much-discussed Be More Bus Plan. The Commission has approved all these plans, though with a critical conclusion and caveat, and this may be a bit glib, but it makes the point. We have the plans, we need the money. MTA's capital program remains essentially flat over the 6-year period, with near-term declines that could challenge fleet replacement and state of good repair progress. The operating budget is rising, but the growth reflects the increased cost of providing the same service, not expansion. And the Be More Bus Plan, unanimously endorsed by us, offers the highest return on investment for improving service reliability and frequency for the 80% of MTA riders who depend on bus service. But as you've heard, the CTP includes very limited near-term funding for the essential facilities required. In short, the system is at a pivotal juncture. The region's plans offer a once-in-a-generation opportunity to deliver a reliable, equitable, and modern transit network, but implementing the plans requires sustained, predictable, and strategically aligned capital investment. So your continued support is vital. I appreciate the opportunity to testify. Happy to take any questions, and thank you very, very much for the time.
Thank you, Mr. Laria. Any questions? All right, we have Mr. Voinis. Correct me if I said your name wrong, please.
Very well done, Chair Watson. Mike Voinis. Good afternoon, Chair Watson, members of the committee. Yes, my name is Mike Voinis. I'm the Senior Vice President leading the Capital Region for T&E Corporation. T&E is a national engineering and infrastructure solutions firm that proudly employs over 300 dedicated professionals in the Capital Region. We have an office strategically located in downtown Baltimore. We're a proud, active member of the Maryland Transportation Builders and Materials Association, for which I also have the privilege of serving as a board member. With a legacy spanning well over a century, T&E provides services that address a wide spectrum of transportation challenges, including planning, design, construction, financing, legislation, community engagement, and ongoing operations. As our firm continues to grow and invest in Maryland, this year we will be moving our Baltimore office just a few blocks away from MTA into a larger space. This expansion reflects our continued commitment to our people and our confidence in Maryland's transportation program. A stable, predictable transit budget provides the foundation necessary for long-term transportation planning. For industry partners like T&E, stability enables us to plan and prepare for the work ahead, invest in staff, and assure we have the talent and resources needed to deliver high-quality, reliable infrastructure for Maryland's residents. This budget supports essential state of good repair needs and allows the state to fully leverage available federal formula and discretionary funding. These investments will improve safety, enhance mobility, strengthen communities, and support thousands of high-quality jobs across the state. A stable transportation program also empowers companies like ours to continue expanding our workforce, grow our presence in Maryland, and contribute to ongoing economic development. When the transportation sector thrives, the entire community thrives with it. Predictable investment in MTA's program helps secure a strong future for Maryland's transportation network and the people who depend on it every day. We respectfully request your support of this budget. Thank you for the opportunity to testify, and we look forward to continuing our work with you.
Thank you. Any questions? All right, next we have Robin Budish.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I am Robin Budish, representing Transit Choices. We are a nonprofit transit advocacy organization, located in Baltimore, Maryland. For over a decade, we have been working to create a first-rate multimodal transit system for the Baltimore region. We believe a strong regional transit system is fundamental to fostering economic growth and long-term competitiveness. The Consolidated Transportation Program, FY 2026 through 2031, represents Maryland's largest ever transportation investment, $22.1 billion over 6 years. However, it does not adequately prioritize transit in the Baltimore region, in particular, the Be More Bus Plan. The Be More Bus Plan is a comprehensive proposal to deliver faster, more frequent, and more reliable bus service. It would increase bus service by 36%. It would add over 200 buses and build a 5th bus division to maintain the expanded fleet. Yet, the current CTP provides only limited funding, meaning this transformative plan cannot be fully implemented. You know, public transit is more than just infrastructure. It is essential for access to jobs, schools, and healthcare. It reduces traffic congestion and emissions and ensures mobility for all residents. Underinvestment has real impacts. Students struggle to reach school, workers cannot access large parts of the job market, and employers face challenges recruiting and retaining staff. The Be More Bus Plan would address these challenges directly. Maryland has the financial capacity to implement the plan within 6 years. Yet this year's CTP decreases funding for transit while highway funding grows, a pattern that has persisted for over 30 years. We urge the General Assembly to work with Governor Moore and MDOT to reallocate resources and fully fund the Be More Bus Plan so that Baltimoreans can fully benefit from a modern, expanded public transit system. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Ms. Budish. We will now move on to Terrence Fitzgerald.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to address you. I am Dr. Terry Fitzgerald, speaking as a citizen of Baltimore City, a transit user, and an officer of Chesapeake Physicians for Social Responsibility, urging you to amend the MTA budget to provide funds to fully implement the Be More Bus Plan within the CTP, beginning with funds to actually build a 5th bus division. As a spokesperson for CPSR, I would like to add a different dimension to this discussion of the MTA budget. Climate chaos is a serious and dangerous threat to the world, to this country, and to our state. Serious and a reality. Greenhouse gases from burning fossil fuels, such as in our cars, are the major driver of climate chaos. You have the opportunity to take steps to do something about this. Frequent, reliable, and affordable buses in an integrated system allow us to leave the car behind, saving money, decreasing pollution and greenhouse gas emissions, and improving traffic as a side effect. With regard to addressing the dangers of climate chaos, the Be More Bus Plan is just a tiny step, but an important one. It is part of changing our culture and changing from car-centric planning to human-centric planning, which is part of developing a world in which our grandchildren will be able to thrive instead of struggling to mitigate the effects of our failure to look a problem in the face and deal with it now. Frequent, reliable, and affordable transit is a critical part of a healthy and sustainable future. That is why we urge you to work with Governor Moore and MDOT to reallocate and commit sufficient funding to fully implement the Be More Bus Plan within the CTP. Thank you for your time and attention.
Sorry, I was muted. Thank you, Mr. Fitzgerald. We're moving on to Paul Sturm.
Madam Chair, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Great. Well, Madam Chair and members of the committee, thank you for the chance to be with you today. I'm Paul Sturm. I chair the Downtown Residents Advocacy Network in Baltimore, and I manage the Better Transit Now campaign. And real quick, Delegate Watson, I am sitting in your office right now because I missed the announcement that the hearing was moved to a virtual hearing. So I want to shout out your staff who made it possible for me to connect through Zoom, and whatever you're paying them, I would suggest doubling their salary. They've been just terrific. Can't hear you. You're on mute, I think.
I'm sorry. We're sorry that we had that late change, and we appreciate you being here. And I'm glad that they were able to accommodate you. So go ahead with your testimony.
Yeah, my bad for missing the announcement. So you've heard a lot, and I know you're going to hear more about Be More Bus. So let me share a little different perspective with you. 8 months ago, when MTA rolled out the Be More Bus plan, Baltimore transit riders, bus riders in particular, and I'm one of them, celebrated. We were so excited when we saw the plan, believing that the frequent, reliable bus service that we've been asking for over a long period of time was finally on the way. Then, as we all know, the CTP, the 6-year CTP was introduced. The governor's budget, was presented, and there is virtually no, as we've heard, other than a token amount, virtually no money to move the Be More Bus plan forward. So let me leave you with a few items. There are an average of 135,000 transit bus riders each day in the Baltimore area. That's actually 80% of MTA's total ridership. So who are those riders? They're our children trying to get to school on time, our neighbors who want to get to work or do their grocery shopping in a timely way, our friends and family who want to go to sports events, entertainment, recreation, what have you. There also are elderly parents who no longer can drive a car, but still need to get to their medical appointments. If you're a small business owner, they're your customers. If you work for a large corporation, they're your employees. In short, those 135,000 daily users of MTA bus service represent the spectrum of Baltimore region's riders and stakeholders, the spectrum of those. As Baltimore City Council President Zeke Cohen said 3 weeks ago at our Major League Transit rally, a plan without money does not work. A plan without money does not work. That's where we are with Be More Bus right now. So final thing I would say is this. We know that government almost always finds money for what it values. And we believe it's long past time for the state of Maryland to truly value transit and the people in the Baltimore region who rely on public transportation and the bus system in particular, 365 days a year. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sturm. I'm stepping in for Chair Watson for just a moment. Next, we have Brian O'Malley.
Hey, Delegate Spiegel. I had actually been in touch with Delegate Watson's Chief of Staff about giving my time to Isma Sheikh, who's on the call here. So if you don't object, I'd like to do that.
No objection. Go ahead.
Hello, my name is Isma Sheikh, and I'm an 8th grader at Henderson Hopkins, which is a school in Baltimore City. Although I do not take public transit to school every day, public transportation is still a vital part of my life. My father is the only person in my family who can drive. I am underage, and my mother is a cancer survivor, which makes driving difficult and exhausting for her. Because of this, our family depends on Baltimore's bus system. For many students in my community, transit is not optional. It is the only way to get to school, after-school programs, tutoring, sports, and jobs. Yet unreliable service makes that access uncertain. Students wake up hours early and still arrive late because buses are delayed. Some leave school early just to catch a bus and missing critical instructional time. Others stay at school until 7 p.m., waiting for a parent to pick them up because they feel unsafe riding the bus. Safety is another major concern. Some students have experienced harassment while simply trying to get home. A bus should be a safe, reliable pathway to opportunity, not a source of fear. Over time, this creates something even more harmful. Students begin to believe that they are the ones failing, that they are not responsible or not trying hard enough. But in reality, the system is failing them. No student should have to carry the weight of a system's shortcomings. This is why fully funding and implementing the Be More Bus Plan matters. Small investments that begin the project but delay real improvements are not enough. Students who rely on transit today deserve to experience service while they are still in school. They should not have to graduate before the system meant to serve them finally works. Real change should not have to arrive after we do. You have the authority to create meaningful change. If you know this system is failing students now, the question is not whether we can act, it is how long we are willing to wait. I respectfully urge you to commit sufficient funding to fully implement the Be More Bus Plan on a realistic timeline. The decisions made today will determine whether students remember this as the moment change began or the moment it was postponed once again. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sheik. That was very well done. We appreciate you being here today. And now we are moving on to Brian O'Malley. Wait, Delegate Spiegel?
It's actually Brian Wyville now.
Brian Wyville, got it.
Hello, Delegate Watson and delegates assembled here. My name is Brian Wyville with Amalgamated Transit Union Local 1300. Shortly, you'll hear from President McMillan as well. A year ago, one of the major things Local 1300 worked on was finding an additional $400 million of revenue for the Transportation Trust Fund. We considered it our highest calling politically last year, and we were happy to find that money. At the time, though, we warned that one of the worst things that could possibly happen was finding that money, but not finding enough to make the real change that was needed for transit riders to feel the impact in the state. Now, you'll hear everyone today talking about Be More Bus Plan and the importance of funding the Be More Bus Plan. Part of the reason why we believe that that $14 million allocated for that land acquisition is not enough is because our biggest fear is that is going to purchase the land for the 5th Bus Division, but if you look at the CTP, there's no additional money for the following 6 years. So that land will sit vacant. Baltimore Transit riders are basically going to have to wait another 6 years for real assistance to come and support them. So additionally, Delegate Watson, actually, it was you yourself that asked how much money would it take to fix Baltimore Transit. The happy answer that I can tell you right now is it's written in the Be More Bus Plan. It's spelled out for $130 million additional for staff and kind of operating resources. It's $365 million for additional vehicles, and it's $650 million to purchase and build and design and construct that new 5th Division. So I'm proud to say that MTA did the work. We actually know what it would take to guarantee 30-minute headways in frequency for Baltimore's transit riders in 7 routes with 10-minute frequencies or better. This is a real type of sustainable transit operation that people can rely on and plan their days around. So if you look at comparable systems like WMATA, their recovery post-pandemic was driven by expanded frequency and reliability. We urge MTA to follow the same path, but it requires the funding from you all. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wyville. We definitely understand the problem at hand. And we've had many discussions about it this session and will continue to. And we appreciate your support in helping us reach the goals. We are moving on now to Michael McMillan. Oh, were you guys together or you're apart? Go ahead.
So, thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Michael McMillan, I'm the president of business agent for ATU 1300. I represent the core service of the public transit agency for MTA of operators and maintenance repair. So let me tell you, I've been with MTA since 1995. I've watched new buses be purchased. I was also a bus operator. I was a train operator as well. I'm finally seeing it come to fruition what we've been hearing about since I've been have came to work with MTA, is that we're finally getting the new trains. We're finally meeting the needs of state of good repair and keeping up and not going back to the disinvestment that was there before. This 5th Bus Division is very much needed. it will help, as Brian said, and as all of those who went before me, really echo that same sentiments about all the improvements that it will make. But also, too, when we look at the crime rates and different things when people are waiting on bus stops and how they're getting robbed and sometimes violently assaulted on these buses, it's a lot due to the over congestion. I've personally seen the over congestion and the delays, even for the school students that take place. Sometimes you have this overcrowding to when the schools get out to where you have to pass by bus stops, not only for the riding public, but you also in the morning and afternoon for the students and those who are trying to get to work. Creating and supporting the Be More Bus plan is very needed. I would love for it to be in my lifetime, since I've seen new buses come in, I've seen new trains. I would love to see a new 5th bus division to come in, and that will complete my journey here with MTA and as a union representative and president is saying, hey, Maryland is doing what they need to move forward to making and having a robust transit system here in Maryland, thanks to the Moore and Miller administration, also legislation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. McMillan. Luke Ziegler.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Okay. My name is Luke Ziegler, and I'm a Baltimore City resident living in District 46. So I'm associated with a few kind of transit-related associations, but I'm just speaking on my own behalf as a city resident and a transit rider. I do want to express appreciation, first of all, for the fact that we have funded these transformative changes for the light rail and subway systems, and also for the land for the 5th bus division. But I do want to provide some perspective from my experience as a daily rider. I am a transit rider on the day-to-day. I don't own a car, actually don't have a license. And public transportation is my main means of getting around, that and walking. In my years living in Baltimore, it's let me get to work. It's let me get to the library, meet friends, everything. And for the most part, I don't mind relying on transit as a concept. It's easy as a way to avoid parking. It's convenient when it works, but it can be a very frustrating experience. There's a personal experience that I want to share with the committee just for perspective. A few months ago, I was coming home from the Safeway on 25th Street. This is in a couple miles from downtown Baltimore, and it was in the evening. There aren't many grocery stores that are walkable in the downtown area, just for perspective. When I got to the bus stop, there was already a couple of other people there. As I'd later learn, it was a mother in her 60s and her adult daughter who just gotten off work. We then waited there for over an hour. There's no bus, no information. We were just waiting. This is on the City Link Silver. It's supposedly one of the busiest, the most frequent buses in the city, but we're just waiting there. Eventually, we just gave up on the bus. We began walking south, and we'd walked about half a mile when we actually saw a bus coming a few blocks away. I had to run and catch the bus so that we could all get on. I had to stop the bus. In all likelihood, if I hadn't been there, that mother and daughter, they would have just been left there. It's something I've seen happen a lot, where people are kind of trying to get the bus, but they don't manage to. And they would have had to wait who knows how long, easily an hour, maybe longer, in the middle of the night, just waiting to get home, probably. So I'm presenting this experience not as kind of the worst experience I've had on Baltimore Transit, but it is unfortunately quite a typical one. I'm sure there's much worse. I don't want to speak for, I think students, I've heard of much worse when I was a teacher in terms of being stranded or left behind. And we talk about transit as if it's an important or co-equal part of the transportation network. It's pretty obvious from how we fund it, though, that it's not. And the MTA has already provided us with a schematic of how to improve things. It's Be More Bus, it's as everyone's been discussing. And I'm glad that there has been some funding towards that, but it needs to be fully funded, and it needs to be fully funded as soon as possible in the CTP, because otherwise people will just be left. The same situation that I experienced will happen hundreds of times probably in a year. I mean, maybe thousands, and that will just be happening every day in Baltimore. And as long as we don't make improvements and not just maintenance to the status quo, that is what will continue to happen. So I hope the committee seriously considers that testimony, and thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ziegler. We appreciate the on-the-ground perspective that you provided. And now we are moving on to Patrick Hosford.
Well, good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the subcommittee. My name is Patrick Hosford, Director of Strategy and Research at the Greater Baltimore Committee, an organization powered by more than 300 private sector partners, mandated with a mission to provide private sector leadership and charter an economic vision for the Greater Baltimore region. Transportation is fundamental in that charter. As such, the GBC is proud to co-lead Baltimore's Transit Future, the BTF Coalition, with the Greater Washington Partnership, a dedicated transit coalition represented by more than 70 of the region's premier businesses, civic and institutional leaders. We commend the continued commitment to fiscal stability, state of good repair, and initial fifth division investments. But we really urge this body to prioritize the funding necessary for transit expansion, specifically in the implementation of the More Bus Plan. A modern, reliable transit system is not merely a mobility convenience, it is a foundational economic driver. The region's employers depend on this network to connect workers to jobs, schools to students, students to schools, and customers to businesses. The bus system is the backbone of our regional transit, carrying more than 80% of all MTA riders. The Be More Bus Plan offers a clear roadmap to increase service by 36%, add 200 more buses, and construct a critical fifth bus division. Despite its transformational potential, the CTP lacks this investment, as we've heard, and it needs this early stage investment to require to really build out a robust plan, specifically in the form of additional design funds, acting as a prudent and catalytic next step to jumpstart this forward-looking plan. Failing to advance transit expansion constrains Baltimore's economic potential. Employers cannot scale if the workforce lacks reliable access, and a stagnant transit system limits our ability to support housing developments, attract top-tier talent, and remain competitive. We respectfully ask to support and ensure that the final budget reflects this forward-looking vision. And importantly, we thank you for your leadership, laud your continued support in transit, and we really thank the MTA for their delivery of integral transit services. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We are moving on now to Kevin Edwards. And delegates, please, if you have any questions of any of the panelists, make sure that you raise your hand or just jump in. So we have Kevin Edwards.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and Vice Chair and members of the committee. My name is Kevin Edwards, and I work as a bus maintenance supervisor with the MTA. And today I'm testifying as a proud member of ASME Local 6368. Our work is essential to our agency, and as bus maintenance supervisor, we're responsible for the supervision of vehicle repair and inspections and planning and coordinating all work done as supervisors in the maintenance field. We have a staffing shortage where we are. Generally, we used to have 2 supervisors that work each shift. Now we're down to 1. The supervisors are responsible for overseeing all work on the site during their shift. Now, most sites only have 1 supervisor to each site. Sometimes it can be overwhelming for the supervisor to handle the amount of workload that we're responsible for, from supervising the staff to ensuring reports are completed on time. There are simply not enough people to get the work done that needs to get done. Additionally, we have concerns about movement to electrical bus fleets. Currently, on the bus maintenance side, we do not have the training or maintain or repair the electrical buses, yet we're moving as a state to acquire electrical buses. Our state must invest in training so our members are prepared for this transition. Finally, we've been losing employees to peer employees like WMATA due to the lack of competitive compensation. Our union is advocating for competitive compensation that respects the value of our work. We need fair compensation and make it possible for our members to live above live and keep their heads above inflation. At the same time, the compensation that respects our experience, performance, and to value our work. We ask the members of this body to support competitive compensation for state employees. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards. We appreciate the work of ASME, and we appreciate you being here today. We are moving on to Glenn Smith.
Good afternoon. My name is Minister Glenn Smith, and I am president of Baltimore Transit Equity Coalition and the Reconnecting Communities in West Baltimore Coalition. I also serve as a member of the Red Line Community Advisory Team, and in reference, I have signed on to the support letter as they ask for the Red Line Transit projects planning and development remains fully funded during planning and environmental review. I'm also asking to fully fund and implement the Be More Bus plan as soon as possible, as it is critical to the community's reliability and frequency as far as bringing down commute times to doctor's visits, food markets, and things of that nature. I won't beleaguer the benefits of the Be More Bus plan, but I ask that it be fully funded and implemented as soon as possible. Thank you for your time, your consideration, and your leadership.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. We appreciate you taking the time to be here today, and the rest of the people who are signed up have provided written testimony and are not here for oral testimony. So with that, members, do you have any last questions of any of the panelists? Okay, seeing none, we are finished our hearing. We appreciate everyone's time, and the meeting is adjourned.